Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our discussion panel. Our topic tonight is profit versus social responsibility in 2012. We will be focusing on the lessons learned and changes occurred. Our panelists will discuss corporate social responsibility, ethical leadership, and fair governance practice, and examine how the debate between the bottom line and social responsibility has changed. This event is sponsored by the Sobey School of Business, Canadian Centre of Ethics in Public Affairs, and the Canadian Business Ethics Research Network. Their support is truly appreciated. Now I would like to invite Ms. Chris Stover from Canadian Centre of Ethics in Public Affairs to say a few words.
Good evening, everyone, and on behalf of the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Public Affairs, or CCEPA, and the Canadian Business Ethics Research Network, also known as CBERN, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight and welcome you. CCEPA and CBERN are very pleased to support the efforts of the students in the MBA program here at St. Mary's in the presentation of tonight's panel, as it seemed quite a natural fit for both CCEPA and CBERN, as both organizations strive to stimulate conversations and public engagement on ethics. For those of you who don't know about us, CCEPA is a joint initiative of the Atlantic School of Theology and St. Mary's University, with a mandate to provide an arena for critical thinking on all matters where ethics intersect. And we do this in three ways: through public programming, through research, and helping organizations create frameworks for dealing with ethical challenges. CBERN is a Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council-funded project, which aims also to promote knowledge sharing and partnerships within the field of business ethics across private, governmental, voluntary, and academic sectors. CCEPA plays host to the Atlantic hub of CBERN at its Halifax Centre here on the campus of the School of Theology. For more information about either CCEPA or CBERN, there's information at the back table where you can sign up to be on our mailing list. And we've also put a few DVDs of past presentations there that we'd like you to take home with you if they should spark your interest at all. There are also some evaluation sheets in front of you. We hope that you can fill those out so that we can get some feedback on how you like the presentation tonight, and it helps us form future presentations. Our next event, I just want to take this minute to promote a little bit. Our next event is also in this very same auditorium tomorrow night, same time, same place, and it's part of our series called The Elements, Ethical Uses of Our Resources, Food, Oil, and Water, and tomorrow's talk is on water, so I hope you can join us for that. And I'd also like to welcome our virtual audience here tonight. You can also participate in the feedback. There's a button right on your screen where you can tell us what you thought of the event. So let's get to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. We have four panelists here from local business and academia. They are Mr. Leo MacPherson, the owner of our local restaurant, The Wooden Monkey. After spending 25 years in the food service industry, Leo was inspired in 2004 to follow her lifelong dream to open a restaurant which would bring to Halifax one of the most environmentally conscious restaurants it ever had. The Wooden Monkey had been honored by the Chamber of Commerce Halifax Business Award as being the best new business of the year. Also, the Better Business Bureau had honored them with the Maritime Business Ethical Award. Welcome, Leo. Dr. Peggy Cunningham, the Dean of the Faculty of Management at Dalhousie University. Professor Cunningham holds a PhD from Texas A&M University. She was a professor at Cunningham School of Business for 19 years before joining Dalhousie in January 2009. Dr. Cunningham's teaching and research focused on ethics, corporate social responsibility, and partnership within the field of marketing. Welcome, Dr. Cunningham. Mr. Paul Kent, the President and CEO of Greater Halifax Partnership. Paul has over 30 years of experience at executive and senior management levels in both public and private sectors. Paul is a fellow of Canadian Information Processing Society, a certified management consultant, a member of the Institute of Corporate Directors, and has twice been named one of Atlantic Canada's top 50 CEOs by Atlantic Business magazine. Welcome, Paul. Mr. Scott Ferguson, the President and CEO of Trade Center Limited. Scott holds an MBA from St. Mary's University and a BA from Acadia University. He also holds the designation from the Institute of Corporate Directors of Canada. Scott was named one of Atlantic Canada's top 50 CEOs by Atlantic Business magazine in 2011. Welcome, Scott. Once again, thank you all for joining us tonight. Now I would like to pass over to Wei to start the discussion questions.
Thanks, Lee. Hi, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Wayne DePercio, Sobey's MBA student, and I'm going to be asking the questions for this evening. I'd just like to remind everybody that really the point of the evening is not the questions that I'm going to ask, but they're really just a prop in order to help facilitate a discussion on corporate social responsibility and ethical decision making in business. So what's really important this evening is to hear from our panelists, and even more important than that is to hear from the audience. So we'll be reserving about 25 minutes or more at the end of the evening for questions from the audience. And when you come up, we've got a microphone up there. So at the end of the evening, if you have something you'd like to say, just step up to the microphone and we'll get down to business. All right, just to start the evening, I guess as a Sobey's MBA student myself, as a young and impressionable Sobey's MBA student, the first question really kind of resonates with me as a student. I'm here to learn, and I want to know the answer to this question from a purely sort of academic and a practical point of view. So we're going to start off with Scott. How does a responsible manager balance his or her profit obligation against the cost of being a good corporate citizen? So me, being brand new to a large multinational firm, how do I justify spending corporate money on, charities or corporate socially responsible initiatives?
Thanks, Wayne. I think the first thing that every organization needs to do is to really come to terms with how you connect with your community. And once you do that, I think you do need to incorporate aspects of that thinking into how you perform and how you develop your activities, from business planning to communications and stakeholder relationships. What we've done at Trade Center Limited is we've incorporated that into our mandate of creating community and economic development opportunities. And really what we do look for is any opportunity at any level to create an added benefit for the community. And sometimes it's at a very low community level where it's small contributions, and in other cases it's significant and economic. So on the financial side, of course, as a public corporation, all of our successes and all the events that we attract, our bottom line, it all flows directly to the taxpayer as provincial crown corporations. So every success we have on the financial side of it, one way or the other, finds its way through to the taxpayer. The added piece to that, of course, is we're into the economic generation business, so we create economic impacts. And if you look over the last number of years, you're in the $70 to $100 million range per year, including about $25 million in tax dollars. So on the financial side, there certainly connects. But if you look beyond that, there's many other opportunities, clearly in creating, development opportunities for other communities across the province. We get engaged in community Yarmouth and Cape Breton and other areas in creating wins and event wins. It was the World Junior Hockey Championships, the World Junior Age Hockey Championships for this year for Yarmouth, and or the under 55 games. I think I'll move this. The over 55 games, sorry, for Sydney for this year as well. We do a lot of work with charitable groups in how they raise funds to our facilities, and over last year that amounted to about $2 million in fundraising, and we even engaged, at a grassroots level with smaller groups and organizations, and last year that amounted to about $200,000 in contributions in kind. So we try to engage in every form that of our activity. In some cases, it's at a grassroots level, working with small groups and organizations. In other cases, it's at a higher economic level with tax and other revenue generation. But I think the key is to really find a way that your organization can connect with the community and then try to build your strategy and your activity in and around those connections.
Thank you very much. Paul, you have maybe a little bit more of a traditional corporate background. I mean, Scott works for Crown Corporation, but your roots are a little more rooted in the corporate culture of Atlantic Canada. From a profit-generating private business perspective, how would you answer the first question about balancing the profit and the corporate social responsibility motives?
Well, if you look at my background, I have half my career in the public service within government as well as for profit businesses, so I'm a bit of a hybrid. But we were provided these questions in advance, so we had an opportunity to think about them, and I couldn't help but personalize this and understand what is the criteria I use before I choose where to go and work. And there are reasons why I've never worked for a tobacco company. There are some very valid reasons. That is perhaps somewhat obvious, but in other cases it would not be as obvious. A manager, and the term you used in the question was a manager. We're not talking about the owner or the directors or the board of directors or whatever. A manager expected to manage a portion of a business, expected to do that in a way that generates a profit, constantly has to struggle with the question of what is the valid way for me to pursue that profit motive? How can I do that? How can I do that in a manner that is consistent with the value system of the organization I work for? So one of the first things that I personally have looked for in any place that I've worked is what is the value system of that organization? Does it match my value system? Am I likely then to be caught in a situation of conflict with what I personally value in my behavior, in my ethical standards, dare I say, and the pursuit of that profit? If I can justify personally that what I am doing is honorable, if the big term means a lot, honorable, then perhaps I could argue that the profit that flows from that activity is appropriate. Now, we can get into questions of how much profit is appropriate for a given effort, but you can reconcile profitable objectives with that. So I think it starts from the point of view that any manager who finds themselves in a context that they're uncomfortable with because they're being brought into stressful situations where they're being challenged to go beyond their ethical standards in order to secure the profit that the company so much wants, it's time to get out of that organization. So from the manager, I think that's perhaps the way I'd answer that question.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Cunningham, we're truly blessed this evening to have panelists from such a diverse background. I was wondering, Dr. Cunningham, from a more academic perspective, what does the Dow School of Business teach their students when it comes to making those trade-offs?
As an academic and wondering who set the question, I guess I thought this was a trick question, because I think there's a really fundamental assumption underlying this question when it says, how do they balance their profit obligation against the cost of being a good corporate citizen? And I don't think it's a trade-off. I think you can have great corporate social responsibility and profitability, not or profitability. And there's increasing amount of evidence in the research on corporate social responsibility that really shows there's a very strong business case as well as a very principled case. So I guess as an ethicist first, I would say the principled case should always be there, that it's the right thing to do. But there is also a very good business case as well. And that business case is based on the fact that in some cases, good corporate social responsibility drives much more customer loyalty. It builds your brand. It helps to create a competitive advantage in terms that it distinguishes your brand from other people. It also helps to control your risk and your cost of capital. So that's another big part of the business case. And then finally, all businesses have to build relationships with other partners. And given that business is often a very non-trusted institution, if you can have good corporate social responsibility and build that trust, you're much more likely to have really great relationships with other members of your community, with stakeholder groups, and with activists. So I guess I think it's really all about good business management and corporate social responsibility being part of that, and that it's an investment that can have very good returns. I don't think it's an opposition one against the other.
Thank you very much. I actually wrote that question, and Professor Driscoll made me soften it up just a little bit, but you asked the question, or you answered the question that I actually wanted to ask. You know, me as a manager, MBA graduate, why should I spend my company's hard-earned money on corporately, socially responsible initiatives? And I think you answered that magnificently. Thank you very much. Lil, again, we celebrate diversity on the panel, and you know, as an entrepreneur, you know, and a business owner, you certainly you have a different perspective here because you know that maybe the financing of corporately socially responsible initiatives are a little bit more personal for you as the one that actually has to write the checks for these sort of things as a business owner. Does your view differ from those of the other panelists when it comes to you know, spending your hard-earned money on corporately socially responsible initiatives?
Well, profits in the restaurant business is a tough one, that's for sure. I come from a different world, for sure. And the very reason why I opened this restaurant was because I wanted to begin a more ethical and support a more ethical food system for us, for Nova Scotia, and that was why I got this whole thing going. And our profit margins are restaurants. First of all, the first year in a restaurant couldn't go out of business. 7 out of 10 restaurants go out of business in their first year, so it's a set up to fail. And the profit margins are somewhere between 1 and 2 and 5% if everything's perfect, and it's never ever perfect, so it's pretty low. And especially, stepping out and doing this type of business. And 8 years ago, when I decided to do this, everybody thought I was crazy because I wouldn't be able to afford the food and be able to stay in business at the same time. And 25 years in the business, I got to handle food, cook food, buy food. I've been touching food my whole life. So I became very close to it, and I love food, and I don't want to lose food, our food. So I guess I just got kind of fed up with that and wanted to open this restaurant. But I did work for other people that didn't really have as much initiative to the environment and food issues, and sometimes you can be really creative. I remember I worked at one place, and I wanted to, we were always bringing glasses of water to the tables, and I said to my boss, well, I thought maybe we can save a lot of water and make some money at the same time. I pitched them, I said, if we just stop bringing water to the tables automatically, and we can give them if they want it. If we don't do that, then we have a chance to actually sell beer or wine or sell them a drink. That way, you're making more money, and we're saving water, and we're saving labor, and it's just it's a win-win-win. So you can be really creative, but just personally for our restaurant alone, I set the rules for my manager, and I give him full reign to say, these are the rules that we in the kitchen, and he goes out and does his research. So to me, this is called profit versus social responsibility. They're together. We pulled them apart. That's wrong. It should be the law. You can, and I really wanted to do this restaurant, and I thank God it's working, because I wanted to prove to the fact, and I know all the restaurants were watching me. I know they were. Like, how is Lil making money and staying alive when my lettuce costs more than their meat? And I don't buy white sugar that's $1.50. I buy 50 gallons of maple syrup from Nova Scotia, and not having Coke or Pepsi. You can't open a restaurant without Coke or Pepsi. It's impossible. That's where you make your money. Well, we have local blueberry juice and local cranberry juice, and it was tough, but it's I believe that you guys are the consumers, and you guys are demanding the real cost of food, and that's what we're doing. We're just buying the true cost of food, because the other food, it's not the true cost. If that chicken was $10 and I'm buying a $20 one, the $10 chicken actually really costs $20 or more, but somebody else is paying for that cost. An environment, a community, something else. So we're just paying for the true cost, so hope that answers some of it.
Anyway, Lil, I think your personal success is also a celebration of not only your values as a business person, but also the values of your customers. So, congratulations in that regard. We'll move on to question number 2, and we'll give Scott a little bit of a break and move down the table to Paul. As a business leader in Halifax and in Canada, I'm just wondering if you've noticed that the corporate attitudes toward social responsibility have muted at all since 2008. I mean, certainly in the Maritimes and throughout North America and the world, we've had undergone a tremendous economic downturn and focused more attention on the bottom line. How has that affected people you work with in the business world and their views on corporate social responsibility?
Well, again, as I considered this question prior to coming here today, I couldn't help but remember, and it goes back before 2008, the number of highly public disasters. You go back to Bhopal, Union Carbide, India, 1984, I think that was. The Tylenol tampering, I think that was Chicago, 1982. You think of more recently Maple Leaf Foods and the listeriosis concern and how that was handled, and maybe one most notorious, BP, the Gulf of Mexico, Tony Hayward, the CEO at the time. CEOs today, for coming out of disasters like that, and that's not even touching on the implication of the financial crisis, which is a crisis of trust. You just think of the Lehman Brothers story. There are numerous examples here where you could argue that the CEOs of today are trying to regain the trust of the public. Throw executive compensation levels into that question, and the ethical dilemma of what's an appropriate pay for a senior CEO as he drives profit out of his business. Arguably, BP cut corners in order to make the profits that they were making. They had rebranded their organization as a green organization, as an organization that was going to transform the world with its green energy and green principles. And yet, whether it's truth or not, whether it's fact or fiction, the global perception is it was a company so consumed by profits that it cut corners and created one of the greatest environmental disasters of our history. So, I think the CEOs of today are working very hard, if only because of the financial crisis, but because of all these other things too, which have been that the relationship with the community, which is so important, the community that you sell to, the community in which your product evolves and is sustained, that relationship of trust is broken, and there's a very intense attempt to fix that. Now, what that does mean, I would expect, is that there are those companies that are serious about that, and there are those companies that have a facade, and that it is essentially a marketing gimmick, and it doesn't profoundly change their business. But with the Occupy movement and things of that sort, which really are all about rebalancing and realigning the understanding with business and the legitimacy of business in given context, I think there's a major emphasis on this in most organizations, in the Western world anyway, certainly.
So that's interesting. So your position would be that all the economic challenges we faced have actually strengthened and reinforced the importance of corporate social responsibility as opposed to making them uneconomic.
Well, I would argue that at the core of the financial crisis is an ethical one, because what was being done was not necessarily illegal, but I think ultimately, when you wind it backwards, there was a tremendous amount of ethical misbehavior in and around derivatives and all that sort of stuff. So,
Dr. Cunningham, how would you respond to that question?
Well, there's two questions here. So the first one, I guess I'd answer in terms of how the attitudes towards corporate social responsibility change by looking around this room. And I think it's not too many years ago that if you had even tried to field a topic on this, what the topic is tonight, there wouldn't be very many people sitting in this auditorium. And when I first started doing my research in this area, I teach marketing and ethics, which everybody thinks is tremendously funny. But, business was not considered to do anything that wasn't directly tied to the bottom line and the profit motive. And teaching MBA students was a real trial, and a trial by fire, because I used to call it the football syndrome. The football syndrome is that I have my shoulders up so high, I can't even entertain the fact that there might be corporate social responsibility important to me as a manager and important to building that business case. So I think there's been an absolute sea change within the last 10 years, probably even the last 5 years, in terms of really thinking that this is an important part of management and that you do have to manage it. So really thinking about and asking the questions, well, what are the frameworks that I can use, just like I use frameworks in accounting or in finance or marketing? What are the frameworks that I use to understand my obligations when I think about corporate social responsibility? How do I not only manage myself, but how do I manage my employees, given that I have the responsibility to make sure that my employees are staying within the constraints of the law and doing what's morally right, particularly in an era where we're getting increasingly uncomfortable about talking about our values. So when we separated church from state and church from business, we stopped talking about values altogether. So how do we manage in the absence of values? Paul referred that to that question a little bit later. And how do we know and how do we articulate our own values so our employees know, how do you ship those crates out the door, and what are the constraints around shipping those crates out the door? What are the things that should say stop? Yes, we want to increase our sales, but there's constraints around increasing those sales. And I think, again, just to say that, corporate social responsibility, the second question, has there been a downturn in the economic recession? Well, the research is showing that it's been anything but a downturn. But again, even asking that question implies to me we're thinking that corporate social responsibility is a discretionary expenditure. Because in times of downturn, you cut all your discretionary expenditures. You cut your advertising, you try to work with the most efficiency, you tend to cut your labor force. So, should we be cutting corporate social responsibility as well? Well, what's really been seen, and most of the research been done in 2012, it's remained fairly steady state. Now, companies have executed and implemented their programs differently, more efficiently and more effectively. So, for example, when they're advertising, they might not have a product ad, a corporate social responsibility ad. They do blended ads, but the point is they're still doing it. And it's still really seen as part of good business practice and no longer a discretionary expense.
Thank you very much. Lil, in the face of all this economic pressure, do you find that your own attitudes toward corporate social responsibility have changed? And how would you compare those sort of conscious changes, if any, with those of your colleagues in the entrepreneurial world?
Well, there's definitely some big change going on, and we're going through a shift, I feel. Even the last 8 years, when I first opened this restaurant to now, there's huge consciousness happening on this planet, everywhere, and it's coming with speed. I call ourselves the green tsunami. We're coming, and look out. But what's happening, too, is we're getting a lot of greenwashing, and these issues are coming up, and just stuff like, you have the largest corporation in the world, Walmart, going organic. And people's like, wow, that's really something. What do you think of that? And I said, well, it makes me a little nervous, definitely, because I'm not quite sure how they're going to do that or pull that off. But it does show that they've done their homework, and you bet they have. So it's coming. And I think corporations and CEOs are realizing that's actually the way to go, because that's where the money is. And sometimes people are doing it because it's in their gut and it's in their heart, and sometimes they're doing it just for the money. And you can tell. I've seen so many businesses, and I've did some traveling, and I've been invited to a couple of restaurants, like, hey, come on over. I've got this green restaurant going, and I'm doing really good things, and I really care. And I go over, and it's like, nah, I can just tell that the heart's not over there, but they're trying. But and just the green sector right now is the fastest growing sector in the world today. It's coming. I mean, when I went to Copenhagen, the climate conference was one huge thing, a whole box to talk about. But one of the main things was the green, it was the big trade show, the green trade show they had before. Holy mackerel. That's what was happening. That's where the excitement was. It was phenomenal. And they were like this huge, big green trade show. And they weren't employees in the booths. They were CEOs and owners. And boy, there was some major business going on there. The world was there. It was amazing. And I thought, wow. And the technology was just unbelievable in Copenhagen, solar-powered garbage cans, and people are like, well, why would you have that? You know, it's this garbage can that you can see anywhere because it's lit up all the time because it's solar-powered, and then when you put your garbage in it, it compacts it down, and that little beeper goes off when it's ready to be picked up. So they're saving tons of fuel. But it's getting really creative, and I find right now everybody's getting creative because everything has to be redesigned, repackaged, reinvented. So we're in a really big time where this is a lot of money can be made right now. I've got about 7 businesses in my head that I'd love to open. But absolutely, it's coming. I know our customers are showing us, you know, our sales are going up every year, and we have some wonderful loyal customers because, you know, some people come in, they even say, you know, I like eating here because I feel like I'm doing more than just eating. I'm supporting a system, you know, that means something to them. And, you know, I want to eat our way to that. I want to be that world. I want to turn, and we all need to do that. We don't have time here. You know, we shouldn't be, you know, this is a great discussion, but we need to hop on and just make it so that, you know what, planet, people, profit. That would be our new triple bottom line. That's ours, and we need to build a local living economy for us. To me, that's the best way for us to go. I'm probably all off now, but
well, it's nice to have sort of an international anecdote there to help put our conversation tonight into some perspective. Scott, I was just wondering, with regard to the changes in attitudes toward social responsibility, do you think that the changes over the last few years have happened as a result of perceived economic downturn, or if people, you know, push their way through in spite of the economic downturn?
You know, I think that maybe more of the latter. You know, when I thought about this question, actually, I was thinking more along the lines of how public, or I was thinking of public as well as private organizations, and I was thinking that, you know, this might be one area where public organizations have maybe taken a little bit of a lead over private sector. And, you know, I think of government organizations, certainly, you know, Obama and some of the things that he's trying to do with an open and transparent, you know, government. I think of our own provincial government, actually, who is said and is doing some things in that area. And, you know, I know since becoming a CEO of Trade Center Limited, you know, we've certainly taken the lead as a provincial crown corporation on what our major stakeholder is looking for. And, you know, they're certainly looking for, and I see this as an aspect of CSR. I mean, they're looking for, you know, operational effectiveness and how we're running our operation as we're dealing with public and taxpayer dollars and we're creating benefits. I see that, you know, we've made changes, significant changes at board and other levels from a governance perspective. I think that some of the processes that we've been engaged in have been very open and transparent. So I look at along the lines of, you know, the public sector might very well have been taking a bit of a lead, I think, in this open and transparent approach to their operations, which I think is an aspect or a dimension of CSR.
You know, I find it interesting. A common theme between amongst all the responses is that CSR is not a burden. You know, despite the either recent economic problems that the world has been working its way through. It seems to be a common theme between the 4 panelists that you know, CSR, as you said, Dr. Cunningham, is not a cost. It's a way to actually participate in the global community while generating a profit. They're not mutually exclusive sort of concepts. Just moving down the table to Dr. Cunningham. Myself, as a maritimer, born in Sydney Mines, Nova Scotia, I've moved throughout the world of Canada and often prided myself on the concept of maritime hospitality. You've lived in several countries, and I was just wondering if how would you compare attitudes regarding corporate social responsibility here in the Maritimes with those, in other parts of Canada and in other parts of the world?
Well, I think one of the things that's very nice about the Maritimes is the humbleness of a lot of business people that are here. So I think there's a lot of corporate social responsibility going on, particularly when, and it's been a very historic, probably even more historic than in other places. So when you think of the number of small businesses, and particularly the number of family businesses that are in this region, and if you're putting your family name on your business, whether you're Shaw, for example, that's pretty important when every day somebody's going to see family name, my place in the community. So I think it's always been a part of the ethic of how business is practiced in this community. And it's a very tightly networked community and a very tightly networked region. So I think, again, there's probably been a lot of that quiet corporate social responsibility that we don't recognize. I guess the other thing is there's a lot of us very small businesses in this region as well, and small businesses often get a real lift from doing strong corporate social responsibility programs, just because, again, they have a higher level of trust and there's bigger payback to that trust. So if a large corporation like Walmart that Lil mentioned, when you think of Walmart, and then I think the next, either before or after, where Lil said, Walmart greenwashing. There's a lot of distrust when any big corporation undertakes corporate social responsibility. Basically, why are you doing it? What's your ulterior motive? This can't be authentic. Whereas with small business, because we trust it, it's embedded in the community, we know it's there to be part of our community, there is that real premium paid to trust. There's much more willing to kind of not doubt their motives in terms of what they're doing, but just really respect what they're doing, see it as being part of what they're giving back to their community. So I think they've been doing it for a long time, and I think there's a very big, although very modest, sort of whole river of corporate social responsibility going on here.
Now, Lil, you've already talked a bit about your international experience. Do you find here in Halifax and as a Maritimer that you're leading the charge when it comes to corporate social responsibility? And how does your experiences here in Halifax and in the region compare with those that you've experienced abroad?
We're doing good, but we can do great, and that's the direction I want to go into. And I felt that we can do much better. Our city as well. I mean, we are doing great things, and I know when I went to Copenhagen, I keep saying that, but it was such a huge part of my life. The bike lanes were amazing. 38% of them bike to work, and I biked the whole time there, 8 days, and it was wonderful. And I thought, I want a Copenhagen, Nova Scotia. Everybody was healthy. There was organic food everywhere. It was clean and green, and it was just a beautiful place. And they had even the Christmas tree lit up with bicycle lights. And I thought, shame on us if we don't do this at home. Shame on us if we don't try to do this. And I came home, really excited to start to try to make change. Which is other places, Denver, I was down there, and I thought, and every time where I go, and I go, wow, there's some beautiful circle wheels that we need to bring home, that we can bring right into Nova Scotia. Desirable transportation. We definitely need to work on that. And I've seen many of that all over the world, but we don't have that yet. We're still in the old buses, so we definitely need to change some stuff there. But there's just some really interesting things I'm reading, even across Canada. CSA's community-supported agricultural systems, definitely going in that direction. Helping feed urban agriculture, the urban sprawl is amazing. I was talking to one girl in the restaurant just the other day. She belonged to one. There was 5 of them that grew enough food to feed 70 families vegetables. 70 families downtown. Just imagine what we can do here. But I do see that we definitely can grow, and I think there's beautiful wheels out there that we need to bring into Nova Scotia, but we need the leadership to have vision and courage for us to go out there and be able to say to ourselves, maybe we made a mistake on this situation. Maybe we can turn it, we can change it. But I think we definitely need lots of room to grow. But we're doing good.
So, Scott, I was just wondering if you think that, as a Maritimer and a leader in maritime business, if folks in Nova Scotia and in the Atlantic region live up to our self-professed reputation for, being ethical, hospitable, socially responsible in business.
Well, I think from the social community connect as Atlantic Canadians, I think we're in a very strong position. I think we're ahead of the curve, and we do a lot of wonderful things naturally. Certainly, as it relates to responding to community disasters or other issues, we see it time and time again at a personal level as well as an organizational level. And certainly in my business, with the floods and the hurricanes in Haiti, a few years ago, you saw organizations step up, including Brooks Diamond, who led that with the artistic community to create fundraising, other activity. So I think as a community, we are a very warm and connected community. And the greatest compliment I ever got for Halifax was from a meeting planner that referred to Halifax as a real city with real people, and meant a lot to that planner because they were speaking about the attractiveness of the city and the warmth of the people and why they loved to be here with their group and organization, because I think people from around the world who are, engaged in very loud and boisterous and unsafe and unfriendly and hostile environments, when they do come to Halifax, they do connect and they do get a tremendous warmth, and they feel that from our people. So I think that's the strength of our brand and our reputation. And so I think it's something that we need to continue to lever and to highlight and to foster into the future, because I think it's what the world needs a little bit more of, and I think it's going to be one of the reasons we're successful, not just as a city but as a leader for Atlantic Canada.
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott. Paul, as you work in the environment of business development here in the city of Halifax, do you find that corporate social responsibility initiatives are a hard sell in the Maritimes? Do we lead the way when it comes to these sort of attitudes, or do we lag behind some of our business partners in other regions of Canada?
Well, I would accept Peggy's characterization that we culturally have an approachability which is very useful, and we have to be very careful that doesn't disguise a less than sharp ability to compete. Sometimes we refer to cities as you got to be a shark to be successful there. That sort of thinking. But generally speaking, I wouldn't say we're that dissimilar from other parts of the world. And I'm mindful of an experience I had at Bell Alliant when I was there. I was asked to go to Mumbai to speak at a large IT conference, and there was an Indian firm there that wanted to do business with Bell Alliant. And that gentleman worked very, very hard on establishing a relationship with me while I was in India and afterwards. And his approach to wanting to do business with me was so principled. I mean, this is India. You think about fast pace. This is Mumbai. This is an IT company. This is a dominant IT player, India. This is an India that's starting to buy back colonial ownership. It bought Jaguar, Tata. Anyway, it just at the end of the day, it turned out to be a situation where he wanted to justify the relationship with Bell Alliant first before we transact any business. Because if we transact business in any other way, it's not likely to be sustainable. And it struck me that in North America, what we do is we look for the transaction first to justify the need to create a relationship. It's completely around the other way. So I found myself far more respectful of that way of doing business than what I recall from my home environment, where, as I said, we're somewhat mercenary. Let's get the transaction done. If I like you, I might come back for more, and then we'll establish a long-term relationship. So I think India's got it, and Southern Asia apparently that's how they qualify business.
Again, I guess we have a lot to learn from all four corners of the globe. Moving on to our next question, we'll kick it back to Lil. As a new employee, to a large company, as I look out at all the many social and economic issues that face the world today, I'm overwhelmed by, a sense of helplessness, or you could imagine that one could be overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness. You've lived corporate social responsibility, throughout your whole professional life, and I'm just wondering, how can employees impact business behavior? How can the individual employee impact business behavior? And you've already talked about how you began to affect change.
Well, first of all, I'm not perfect. I wasn't always good, but I think sometimes we've had some wonderful employees and still have some great staff, and when they come in, sometimes you can just to be yourself and be your own change, and set an example can sometimes change people. There's lots of times that my employees are showing me things and they're bringing stuff to my attention, and it's great. They're biking to work, and you see as well. You see employees coming on that don't know very much about what's going on in the food system that actually learn to change. That's actually that's the beautiful thing that I love to see. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it really is. It's amazing, and I'd like to almost speak about that because it's really amazing when you see people change. It's wonderful, and I've seen so many people, so many employees that came in and didn't know very much, and it's such a huge learning curve, at our restaurant, because they have to learn about, organics and celiac and gluten allergies and factory farming and pesticides, and it's just a really big learning curve for them all, and organic and everything, and it's nice to know that the employees are really getting engaged and that want to learn. And then you have people that actually come to your restaurant because they want to work there. And I try to, bring on the other restaurants too, and everybody's jumping on board. There's a lot of actually restaurants that are coming more on board, and it's really wonderful. People say to me all the time, aren't you a little nervous if people, open another organic restaurant? Or I said, no, I want everyone to. That's all. I mean, I actually even talked to the Restaurant Association one time. I got together and I pitched to them. I said, if we're actually quite powerful. We buy a lot of food. We could change the food system of Nova Scotia if we all do this together. And I tell you, I have to say this, there's nothing, and I've worked in the restaurants and dealt with Cisco trucks and the whole thing, but I tell you, there's nothing more pleasurable than have a farmer come through your back door and give you a big box of chicken, and he's got his kids behind carrying the eggs carefully, hopefully, and you get to do something beautiful. You get to write him a check, and then I take his food and I sell it and I get a paycheck, and then you get this going, eh? And it's like this wonderful local economy that we're developing, and to me, that's the magic. And then when the world falls down out there, we got business at home. And I think that's really a key to our survival, to make sure that we have the food systems in place. I'm all about infrastructure, and I'm worried about that. I know that we're going to get jolts and shocks in water systems, food systems, energy systems, and I think that we ourselves need to hunker down and pay more attention to our own, invest in our own selves. We're worth it. Kind of got off track there.
No, that's great, Lil. Thank you very much. Scott is the CEO of Trade Center Limited. How can your individual employees make a difference? And how you personally, how have you impacted change in your own organization when it comes to corporately responsible social behavior?
Well, I think a lot of it, starts, you hear the tone from the top a lot. So I think, we've got a relatively small organization, and we've actually, I think, are very heavily engaged with our community at a lot of levels, and we've been talking about it for many years. And the new strategy that we're developing and unveiling really is, I think, an evolution of that activity. So there's already, I think, some good connectivity and communication with our employees. But I think because we're in the people business, that's probably easier for us. As an employee trying to drive change in an organization, it's tough if the organization doesn't want to hear, if their opinion is not being sought out, if they're not part of the discussion, a part of the strategy building. So I know in our organization, we're not a large organization. I think we've done some good things. There's still lots of many others that we can and will do in the future. But obviously, when you come to terms with the role that you need to play or can play in your community, and you incorporate it into who you are and what your strategy and what your mandate is, obviously you need to connect with your employees as part of that.
So, Paul, I sort of believe in the inherent goodness in all people. And, how do people that I think, I really believe that everybody wants to make at least a little bit of a difference. So if I'm an employee in a large company and I'm struggling, to try and make a change, what are the small things that I can do to try and affect change as a new employee to a large organization?
Well, I'm going to evade your question just a little bit, but just comment a bit on what was said, and then we'll back into it somewhat. How someone executes a job is so important. How? It's one thing to get it done. It's another thing to be able to show that you did it in a manner that was consistent with, behaviors and tactics and strategies and mentality and sensitivity that is expected. I think it was Jack Welch with GE, and if you think about GE, one of the largest corporations in the world, bigger than countries in terms of its size, making everything from light bulbs to aircraft engines. And Jack had a management philosophy that really stressed that you could be let go from your company regardless of how much profit you had generated, because you didn't do it the way the company wanted, because of how you did that. And it was a very elaborate mechanism for senior management review, but nevertheless, the bottom line was if you didn't toe the line and execute your function in a manner completely consistent with the dictates of your organization, then you were not kept, regardless of how profitable you appeared to be. Because ultimately, on the long term, that would, I guess if that was allowed to flourish within the company, it would be like a cancer against the values that company had, and it would erode competitiveness and so on. So it was a very, very long-term view. So, your question was how can you encourage those to change? I'm not going to answer it.
Actually, you quoted Jack Welch. Well, I'll quote Barbara Walters, who said, "Never let the question get in the way of a good answer." So that was well done on your part. Dr. Cunningham, as a student at Dow, what can I do as an individual, to help foster a climate of corporate social responsibility? And I'll flip the same question back to you. What do you feel your contributions have been?
Well, there's a double-barreled question that got me. So let me answer the first part first. I think, anybody, whether you're a new student or whether you're a new employee in a corporation, you come into that organization with really fresh eyes. You're often on the front line, you're really working at the operational level, so you'll see things that people that have been socialized into the corporation for a long time haven't seen. So part of, you have a great opportunity for the first few months that whether you're a student in a university or whether you're a new employee working for a corporation, to be able to critically look at that company and say, things why are they done this way? You also have great opportunity to start and get involved in some of the corporate social responsibility initiatives that your organization is taking part of. So many organizations have volunteer days now, or they do things to raise funds for a cause, whether it's United Way or whether it's cancer research or Run for the Cure or something like that. So you've got great opportunities as a new employee or a new student to take a leadership role and really make a profound difference. It's also a great career builder for you if you're looking for the business case for yourself. Because when you're on these teams, and you'll often take leadership roles on these teams, it exposes you to a whole range of management and a whole range of people that you wouldn't normally be exposed to if you're doing that. The other thing is whether you're a student or you're an employee in a company. So if you're my student at Dell, and I'm going to lead back into where you kind of pushed me into the thing with the difference that I have made. Students look at me. They look at the leadership of a company. They look at the programs that, whether you're a dean at a faculty of management at Dalhousie, whether you're the CEO of a corporation, you're scrutinized by your employees. And if your corporate social responsibility program isn't authentic, if your code of ethics isn't authentic and then it's enforced, it's lived, if your values aren't authentic and they're enforced and they're lived, if your actions as a CEO or a dean aren't authentic and enforced and lived, then those employees should and can push back and really express those differences and say, you're not walking the talk. You're saying this, but you're not doing this on the ground. It's a very powerful message for anybody to hear. And if those messages are resisted or the ears are closed, then I think the most powerful thing you can do as a student or as an employee is really, vote with your feet. And the most precious thing that Lil has or I have, if I'm a dean and a faculty, it's my students and it's my faculty members. Lil's got her employees. Other gentlemen have your employees. Great employees, great students are really hard to find. Mm-hmm. So if enough people start walking with their feet because you're not authentically living what you say you're doing with your code of ethics and your corporate social responsibility program, that's a huge wake-up call for any CEO or any dean.
Anyway, thank you, Professor Cunningham. I want to thank the panelists. We finished actually right on cue, I believe. And I just, it's incredible how the hour's gone by. But again, now for the most important part of the evening, I'll turn the microphone over to Lydia, who's going to moderate the Q&A portion of the evening. Thank you very much.
Our time's a little bit limited for questions, so just frame your question in a clear, concise, respectful manner, and then we'll just give the panelists a chance to answer and get as many questions in as possible. So.
We're all lining up.
Yeah, I don't know to whom I should address the question exactly, but there was a period, I think, when corporations felt that they could, exercise corporate social responsibility by philanthropy, and it seems to me that I think corporate social responsibility does not simply include philanthropy. I think there's a tendency to think that's anonymous, and I don't think it's necessarily the case. But in recent years, there's been a tendency, I think, for organizations to try to use philanthropy or corporate responsibility to brand themselves. And there are some people who might regard that as being rather crass or being rather self-serving. I'm wondering if anybody, perhaps Dean Cunningham, might respond to that question. But I do think that there's a tendency, I think that organizations may feel that they can't simply exercise philanthropy, especially if it's just something that the CEO happens to want to do. And I think in the past, organizations, especially corporations, would do things because the CEO happened to have a passion for certain activities or certain causes. Is that as common as it used to be?
Well, I'll start, and then I'll turn to my fellow panelists. I think there's about 3 questions in there, I think. So first of all, yes, corporate social responsibility is far more than philanthropy. Certainly philanthropy is an important part, but again, I think what you were alluding to is philanthropy is really giving a gift without the expectation of a return. So that can be part of your corporate social responsibility program. The last part of your question where you talked about do CEOs just do things and give to philanthropy because that's their kind of pet cause or pet thing, that's really changing. I think people and corporations are being much more strategic about what they do with their donation dollars and their development dollars that they're giving away to support community causes, and they're being much more strategic. There's a real split between some corporations like Mountain Equipment Co-op that Karen's here, which has decided that they want to disperse their efforts so that they have as much reach to as many organizations as they possibly can with their philanthropic types of dollars that they're giving away. Whereas other companies say, I'm going to only do one thing and have a very big impact on that one thing, whether it's education or whether it's healthcare, et cetera. So I think that's changing to a large degree. I will confess I am the evil marketer here, and I do build brands. That's part of what I'm trained to do. And I really think actually it's a very good thing because your brand is your trust mark. Your brand is your promise to your people. And if part of your brand is the promise to be committed to your community, to be committed to your workforce, to create value for a number of stakeholders, I don't think that's a crass thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. That's my promise as a corporation of what I'm going to do as a member of this community.
I tend to agree. I worked for 4.5 years with Bell Alliant when the tagline was "Here for You." Some of you will remember that. And I can tell you, working in the executive of that organization, that the individuals there were absolutely driven to do that. Now, you could denigrate that interest if you wish. Like you could argue that that was simply there to preserve business in small communities. The reason we would support a small ice hockey team in Lunenburg County, or would invest in a PET scanner at the QE2 hospital, you could denigrate that. But the sentiment at the time was, here was a significant company, one of the largest companies in our region, that had continuous relationships with businesses for over 100 years, continuous relationships with each community for well over 100 years. This is what we should be doing. But I can tell you that at a board level, and I went to every board meeting, was in the back row, called to task from time to time, there was occasionally discussion around, what right do you have to do this? You are taking the rightful gains that our shareholders would benefit from and just spending it in the community. So there was always that debate around the validity of philanthropic acts, I guess you could call it, but corporate social responsibility, actively demonstrating that you're in alignment and in sympathy with community concerns and are supporting it. And the extremely right-wing view that unless you have the express consent of every single shareholder, you shall not give out anything, which of course is absolutely absurd. But I can tell you that the folks I worked with at Alliant at that time were absolutely driven to do the right thing with a limited amount of money, to provide tangible assistance to a community that needed that level of support. And I think for a long time, some of customer loyalty was actually tied to that. So we're dangerously close to marketing philanthropy. But I felt at that time that was an honorable pursuit, what we were attempting to do, and we tried to do it as well as we could.
Thanks. I can only speak from my perspective, but actually from the the public side. I know it's an interesting question with respect to how much you talk about what you do, and I threw a number out. I mentioned earlier. We even on working with grassroots organizations who are calling us looking for access to product or items or tickets or boxes for fundraising and other activity. In my 27 years at Trade Center Women, I've never said no to anyone that's called has gotten something. We've never talked about that because in one sense I did see talking about that as taking away from the value of doing that. And for the first time ever we measured that last year, and it was $200,000 last year in product that we passed on to grassroots community organizations. And when I look back at all the things that we've done with social services and tickets and events, I mean, the list goes on and on. But again, it's not something that we talk about a great deal. We do automatically because we think that's part of our responsibility as a provincial crown corporation to wring every benefit out of the event activity that we attract into the marketplace and to push that benefit stream into the community. And sometimes it's beyond Halifax, sometimes it's at a grassroots, very personal, very at a lower level. In other cases, it's at a higher level. But it's always interesting. We talk about that internally, about how much we talk about that, within our community. I mean, I don't know. And the key is that you do it, and I guess we do it, and we'll have to figure out how we talk about it in the future.
I'd like to just mention, it's funny, just speaking of Nova Scotia and the directions we go into and some of the things that we seem to question. And I just wanted to mention a couple things. And I wonder, like just the hydraulic fracking that's been introduced coming into Nova Scotia and how social and ethical that is. And how maybe we don't do all our homework and how the dollar can glaze people's eyes to think that's the only way. And then, issues like biosolids that are going to be spreading pretty soon here in the spring to HRM that are acceptable levels of chemicals. Acceptable levels of chemicals, I can't stand that anymore. It's not right. And sometimes, even now, home here, we've got some work to do with some corporations and some government. And just being on a personal note, going through the biosolid issue that Ellen Page and I had a whole conference on here trying to educate the people on this issue and bringing science to the table and doing the ethical thing and trying to help the councillors and the mayor make better decisions and bring the science that they said that we didn't have, brought it to. We brought one of the finest scientists in North America and the world on biosolids here to Nova Scotia, and they didn't listen. And sometimes I thought, gee, that's just wrong. And taking the moratorium off a week before the whole province got together as councillors and talked about it. There's definitely some things that I know I'm opening a box here, but we're all here, and it's about our province, and I'm brave enough and courageous enough to bring that up. But those are the things that we need to talk about. We need full disclosure, and when we are in question of something is going to harm us, then the precautionary principle needs to come into effect. And I think those two things that we need to be aware of, those words in our province right now, is hydraulic fracking and biosolids. There's one that's a fast kill and there's one that's a slow kill. And I think we need to. We're talking about the environment and ethical and the world and our future. Then we need to stand up and talk more about these things. Just wanted to add that.
Good evening. Thank you very much to the organizers and to the panelists. I have two questions. Scott, I was wondering if you could clarify, in light of the concert scandal and in the convention center controversy, how you and the Trade Center are rebuilding community trust and implementing CSR practices. And the other question is for Paul. Paul, how is it ethical that Halifax is building warships? Why did the Greater Halifax Partnership in the JUPIA and the Conference Board of Canada reports not consider the the environmental and social costs of building warships. We have a fact sheet saying how irresponsible it is of government and of industry of squandering $25 billion of our precious tax dollars investing in warships instead of investing in sustainability or a national green-collar job strategy. So if you both could answer those questions, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
You want to switch questions, baby, right? Thank you. Well, first of all, on the concert question that you mentioned, as CEO of Trade Center Limited, my responsibility, of course, is to deal with that issue in a very open and transparent manner. I think we've done that. We've worked closely with our partner at City Hall as well as my major stakeholder in the city, AG to act on all the recommendations that came forward. And yes, we have introduced a number of policies and adjustments to our governance approach in certain areas that hadn't been there in the past. And I think as an organization, we're a stronger organization as a result of that. With respect to the convention center, opportunity, I would call it. I see this convention center as one of the biggest economic development or community economic development opportunities we have available to us. And it all ties into what I'm calling, a strategic event approach to business, and it's a longer, presentation possibly, but in my view, this is an opportunity for us to lever the millions of dollars we've spent in a whole series of areas from marine and medical research and many, many others. The convention business allows us to attract the world's innovators, the investors, the biggest thinkers in all of these areas into our community. And of course, I see it as a tool in our toolbox. It's a levering opportunity. It's a growth opportunity. And I've spent the last 2 years speaking with a lot of smaller groups and organizations. Love to have the opportunity to speak to anyone in the room on it. I think it's a very exciting opportunity for this province.
I didn't expect that question, but I respect that question. Canada's Navy, 100 years old, Halifax, a town founded on its naval heritage. A town that probably first was settled because a naval officer decided to set up a tent here. A port city, a community that is gathered around the port, a port that is rich in resources, rich in potential, rich in commercial value. An asset for all of Canada to share and to utilize. A gateway to international markets, a major gateway into the interior of our continent for the transportation industry. I could just go on about how it is an absolutely natural act for us to attempt to be the builder of our nation's next flotilla of ships. Ships that are there to defend. It's not the Department of Warfare, it's the Department of National Defense. And ships which I could argue, and you could get the Rear Admiral in here to do it, he's probably more apt at it than I am, that help police our borders, help protect our fish stocks, help protect the integrity of our boundaries with the ice-free north, even more need for them. But it's up to the Navy to justify the Navy. It was a legitimate piece of business to go after. It's a legitimate role. It's historically significant to us. And I would argue is a core element of who we are in the first place. So there is ultimately in your question a philosophical question around is a Department of National Defense ethical or not? And I believe it is. And I believe that what we've done is a very, very significant accomplishment for the region, one without parallel in our history.
Because we can. The biggest threat to Canada right now is climate change. Nobody's going to attack us tomorrow. If we have all these ships, who's going to attack us? I know it's wonderful, but I don't think we need, honestly, and I'm probably going to get in trouble here, I don't think we need that kind of force. If we took the billions and billions of dollars and use it for renewable energy for the country, everyone in the world would be coming to us. To eat, to shop, to look, to learn. We would be the world leaders. If you took all the coal and oil and gas in the whole wide world and you put it right there, it equals 50 days of sunlight. Is it ethical for us not to go in that direction? Is it ethical for us to build ships for war? We're perceiving we're going to be fighting. You know, what is it like that story where if what is it about the wolf? You know, like whatever you feed, you grow. So if we're feeding and we're growing warships like that, or we're turning this way and imagine the money, the renewable energy we could do in this country. There would be no tar sands, it'd be done. You know, I mean, so there is, you know, there is, I mean, we could have some ships, but not all that money. Let's share.
So it looks like we have some questions within the panel.
Yeah.
Nice to have that diversity.
That's good.
Did you want to comment really quick, or should we move on to the next question?
Share. Take it all.
I just simply say that while I accept the end that you're talking about, there has to be, dare I say, an element of realism about how to progress. And you know, surely you're not saying that we should have sent a letter to Ottawa saying, maybe you are saying, maybe some of you are saying, and as I said, I respect that answer. We send a letter saying not interested.
No, half interested. We don't have to go all the way. Seriously. Do we have to put all our money? It's just such a big hunk of money. And I mean, I'm just being honest. And the thing is, being realistic, climate change is real. It is real. Okay,
So let's move on to the next question from the audience.
But I do have military in my family, so it's a couple of shit.
Go ahead, please.
A little bit different topic, different question anyway. Much of our discussion this evening so far has really focused on sort of local initiatives around corporate social responsibility. Yet I'm interested in, from a more global perspective, looking, where we're seeing very many multinational corporations are embracing corporate social responsibilities, again, as part of a marketing strategy, but as part of their embracing values and expanding values. I mean, I accept all of that. But I'm interested in your perspectives, perhaps particularly Dr. Cunningham, on some of the social accountability standards that, for example, the apparel industry has embraced, and whether or not those are effective strategies internationally, and what are some of the ethical challenges with those, and also from a business perspective, what are some of the, more from a business implementation perspective, what are some of the challenges?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what industry you referred to.
The social accountability, the apparel industry has adopted a standard called Social Accountability 8000, and a lot of the multinational, again, because I think the apparel industry is one of the most globalized industries on our planet. What happens in New York affects little communities in southern India, for example. And so they've adopted this social accountability standard, and you've got this whole long chain of various companies buying products from other companies, and so what's happening in South Asia, for example, is often influenced by decisions that are made in New York. So I think part of it, these multinational corporations have adopted this social accountability standard. There's I think some of the corporations have actually joined together to build international multi-corporate coalitions around building social accountability standards, but yet, and using this part of their marketing strategy, but I think their efforts are sincere maybe at one level, but how do you actually make sure that happens at the way down at the bottom of the global supply chain? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. I hadn't heard what you said in terms of the industry that you're referring to. So kind of let me start at the end and work forward. So first of all, marketing comes last. So just talking about what we're doing this, what Lil called greenwashing. If all you're doing is just some kind of a PR program, that's not corporate social responsibility. And what you're talking about in the apparel industry is really trying to manage your entire supply chain to be highly responsible, accountable, and ethical. And it's an extremely complex thing to operationalize. So it's one of the reasons why these roundtables or these coalitions are coming together, so that they are creating a level playing field, so that everybody's playing on the same level ground, and we're setting the same types of criteria, workplace safety standards, transportation standards, what kinds of equipment you will use, what kinds of processes you will use. I mean, I had just learned fairly recently about the terrible lung diseases that are caused by the blasting of silicone at jean fabric, for example, which is, I think, one of the things that you're referring to. And, the creation of great harm to certain biological or animal species because something becomes certainly fashionable in New York, I think is what you're playing to. So I think, in terms of operationalizing these kinds of things, companies working together with their stakeholders, so again, often corporations are not specialists in terms of what are these core issues. It's really getting your feet on the ground and speaking to the manufacturers in those areas. It's one thing for us sitting very comfortably in North America saying, you people in Bulgaria, or you people in India, or you people in Lima, Peru, on what we think is appropriate standards for you to be doing. Because if I'm sitting in Lima, Peru, living in a favello, and I can't put meat and potatoes on the table for my family, I may have a very different set of values than you can. So it is that coalition and groups coming together and being accountable as a whole that I think is really important. But it certainly isn't easy, and with multiple step supply chains that are getting very against what Lil's doing, but getting farther and farther dispersed and farther away from home, it is a huge operational challenge that you have to be really working with. And as much as I hate to say it, because I've never been a fan of Walmart, they are really setting the standard in terms of really managing those kinds of supply chains and doing it very well. So sometimes the most powerful institution in the world can have great power for good as well as great power for not so good. Sorry, the full answer to your question I think would take all night, but I think that coalition cooperation is a way of the future.
It just seems that there's so many ethically, there's so many challenges all the way down the line, changing cultures, and
exactly.
So many ethical questions that I just wonder whether or not these social accountability centers are really going to embrace all of those challenges.
I think they haven't embraced them all, but they're starting.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Go to the next question.
I'm going to direct this question first to Lil, but I also hope the other panelists will answer as well. Lil has mentioned several times in her comments and responses to questions the importance and significance of buying locally and supporting local enterprise, and in particular in the food industry. Of course, we're talking the agricultural sector. So if that argument is extended across the country, around the world, so that everybody supports their local industry, often to the exclusion then of others, do we not run into a potential unintended consequence or ethical conflict when we in fact may jeopardize the livelihoods of the farming community and others who depend in Nova Scotia on, for example, selling ice cream products and other things clear across the country? And we've got several thousand people in that supply chain sending product out to a global or certainly national supply chain. If we build the argument and narrow to a local context, do we not in fact run the risk that we are getting into the ethical problem of jeopardizing the livelihoods of many of the people that we're actually drawing on?
Great question. I'm glad you brought that up because I'm totally agreeing with you. I'm into local buying for sure, but also fair trade buying. And I've been to Africa, and I went there 2 years ago for an agricultural project. But I absolutely agree with you. And I think if I want to buy organic coffee because I want to support the fair trade coffee little farm, mom-pop farm down in Guatemala, and absolutely. Of course I think we should buy everything we possibly can local. Should be a procurement act on potatoes, carrots, turnips, apples, everything that we can grow here. Shame on us if we're buying apples from New Zealand. Our kids are going to say to us, did you really send apples, buy apples from New Zealand? Yeah, I know we're a little bit crazy. I mean, that's the problem. But absolutely, there's lots of mom and pop ice cream from DD's that if they can go export their stuff, right on, because they're buying from an ethical company. They're trying to do, it's not these big companies, but I'm totally agree with you. Do local as much as you possibly can, but also support if you I buy bananas, I buy all kinds of imported food, but I try to buy the right ones to support that ripple effect down there. I talk about the banana has two stories. There's the tale of the two bananas, and I actually had this little discussion with the woman buying bananas one time at the grocery store, and I'm always looking for a room to work the food system, and I was buying organic bananas, and she wasn't. She was right there, and I said, "Oh, look, bananas are only these organic bananas are only 10 cents more," and she said, "Oh yeah, I don't really buy organic bananas because you don't have to because the skin's thick." And I said, well, actually, I buy them because there's a little more ripple effect than that. I said, I've been down to Central America, and, you go to these plantations that are organic. The trees are there, the birds are there, the soils are clean, the water's fine, people are getting paid fair, nobody's getting sick. You go over to a sprayed plantation, the trees are gone, the birds are gone, the animals are gone, the water's infected, people are getting cancers. It's a bad scene. And if you can ask these people down there working these plantations that have to, they would say, oh, please buy organics, we can go work on that farm. So it's our ripple effect. If we just got to pay attention to our own ripple effect and buy something going, is this hurting anybody, any kid, any soil, any community, anything, it would be wonderful. And we're not perfect, but that's where we need to go. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I hate the 100-mile diet. Well, I don't hate it. It's impossible, almost, unless you want to be a hermit. But absolutely, buy everything local we possibly can. But if you're going to buy it, just support, like for us locals, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, the Maritimes, Canada, and then I go to the States. People ask me, would you buy an organic apple from California or a sprayed apple in Nova Scotia? Sprayed apple in Nova Scotia. You have to weigh everything, but thank you. That was a good question, and I'm glad I got to answer that.
Okay.
This one's for me.
Fair trade.
All right, next question, please.
I would like to follow up on some remarks the previous speaker made. Mr. Ferguson, there were two things that you said in particular with respect to public agencies and corporate social responsibility. One is that you said the bottom line was the taxpayer, and then secondly, you said that public organizations needed to take the lead. Now, I noticed you said that you learned a lot from the ConcertGate scandal and you're going to make some changes. But you weaseled around the discussion of the misinformation, shall we say, that appeared in the Trade Center Limited report boosting a new trade and convention center. And we have the documentation of that here for anybody who wants to look at it. But my question to you is, how does the taxpayers, who you said are, the bottom line for you, how do we keep track of you guys? I mean, it took Tim Bousquet at the Coast to uncover the concert scandal. It took one of the members of the Coalition to Save the View to pay $400 for the proceedings of the conference, which was misrepresented or misquoted in your report. That means that there's a huge responsibility on the taxpayers themselves to keep their eyes on public organizations. So I'd like to know what you see the role of somebody like Trade Center Limited in being honest with the taxpayers, and how do we keep you honest?
Thanks, Bev. As we've talked on many occasions, and when we started this convention center project, actually, I reached out to many members of the community. You were one of the first. We met for a coffee down on Barrington Street, and I, of course, reviewed everything that we were trying to accomplish and tried to explain a little bit about our business and why I saw it as being such a significant and important investment for Nova Scotia, which I understood at the time you weren't agreeing with, and you haven't since. But I'm very proud, actually, of what I consider to be a very open and transparent process on the convention center project. We have spent significant time and resources over the last 2 years producing a lot of research, a lot of work. It has all been made available online on our website. We've had a number of public open houses, consultations. I've spent a great deal of time working and meeting with individuals as well as larger groups, both within Halifax and outside of Halifax. And I think it's an example, actually, that can be held up of how a public organization approaches this kind of a project, because all the information that we have collected, we've put online, and I'm happy to speak to it any time. As I offered to you, which you haven't followed up on, as to, if you wanted to meet again and have further discussions, I'd be happy to do that at any time. Even to the point when I know your organization brought in Dr. Sanders, who's certainly well known from the U.S. perspective on an understanding of what might be happening in parts of the U.S. industry and which actually have no impact on Canada. And he clearly didn't have an understanding of our business here. But again, I went out, I participated in that. We went out, and actually I think I had breakfast with members of your group as well as Dr. Sanders the very next morning. So I think I've been very open and transparent on everything that I've done. I think my organization has been. I'm very proud of that. I still stand by the fact that this project is a very significant economic development opportunity, not just for Halifax, but for Nova Scotia. So I have no apologies to make for that.
Okay, I don't think you quite answered my question, though, which is how does the taxpayer, who you put first, keep track and ensure that situations like the concert gate don't happen, or that misinformation doesn't get into reports? That was my question. I mean, I know I did meet with you and I did have coffee, but that was before any of these other things happened. And I did come to some of your open houses, which were beautifully organized.
Thank you.
But that doesn't change what I'm asking you.
Okay,
so anyway.
I think it's a question of transparency and accountability, basically, which putting online.
Yeah, I mean, Bev, I'm not going to repeat what I just said, but again, I think anyone that knows me, I interact, I think, in a very open and transparent level, at a personal level or at a larger group level, and I continue to make the offer to any groups and organizations that want to talk about my business to invite me or open the door. I'm happy to do that. So as far as the taxpayer, I want them engaged, of course, because I need to be connected to them. I need to ensure that they understand the benefits that we're trying to create together. I can't do this on my own. I need to do it with partners like Paul and other business people in the community. So it's not something we're doing by ourselves. We get as engaged as and we're open as transparent as we possibly can. If there's other ways that we should be, I'm happy to hear your suggestions.
Thank you very much. So our time is a little tight. I see we have one more question, so we'll just do that one really quick, and then we'll end.
I'll make this as quick as possible. I study gambling globally, and one of the interesting patterns is that in the Northern European countries and European countries in general, the governments there intervene in their citizens' lives to ensure that the gambling products offered are less risky than in North America and Australia and that. So my question is, to what extent do you think government should regulate corporate social responsibility? In other words, intervene in companies' business practices?
I think they should. I think just in my experience, I've worked at a lot of places in bars and restaurants, and I guess where a lot of BLTs are. And one of my very best friends lost just about everything in being a gambler, and he's a beautiful man. So it's something that we need to talk about, and it's a shame sometimes that we have to make money on someone else's disadvantage, or someone else's is addicted to something. So and I'm glad they finally, remember they used to have it in the stores, in the corner stores, and the parents would be sitting in the car and the kids would be or the kids would be in the car and the parents would be in there. So they should be regulated, and it is a problem, but they're making money off it.
I'm in favor of just enough government to keep things okay, but just enough government is what I'm in favor of, and I would be very concerned about sort of the intrusive arm of government. In this particular sense, I am absolutely a capitalist. I absolutely believe that there are checks and balances in the system which would inhibit the progress of a business which was not founded on ethical, value-based systems. Social responsibility. Our government has a liquor commission or corporation, and a significant theme of its activity is, I would argue, social responsibility around alcohol. The Atlantic Lottery Corporation spends a lot of money in that area as well. We would probably differ on whether it's the right amount of money, whether it's the right emphasis. We may differ on whether that should be a business at all. But there are ways of managing that, and governments require organizations like that, Atlantic Lottery, the Liquor Corporation, and that to observe, to have certain practices which are helpful. But we've discussed a lot tonight about the motive for corporate social responsibility, whether a CEO or an organizational motive. We've talked kind of about the fact that this leads to better business, more sustainable business, and that's because we're in an increasingly aware world, a world that, the reputation loss of a CEO on one side of the planet can be transmitted in 5 seconds over the planet. So the vulnerability of business to bad news has never been any more acute. So while I believe in a certain degree of government oversight in this, I think that there are and would be natural checks and balances that would inhibit the development of a fundamentally corrupt organization. I hope I'm not naive in saying that. Some of you would believe I'm profoundly naive in saying that. But I, as I said, as a basis, I think just enough government to get by.
Thank you very much. Our time has flown by tonight, so we're going to have to conclude and stop there. Thank you for all your questions. So we'd just like to thank you for all attending on behalf of the Sobey MBA program, the Canadian Centre of Ethics and Public Affairs, and the Canadian Business Ethics Research Network. We'd also like to thank our panelists very much. We know your schedules are very busy, and just thank you for coming out. And we just have a small token of appreciation for you on behalf of our sponsors.
Thank you.